Thanks so much for joining us today, Senator. I wanted to first ask about the Senate clearing its third reading calendar while the House still has a number of things left to do, and has killed a number of appropriations bills. Is the House on a completely different page when it comes to when the legislature needs to adjourn? And is the Senate trying to send a message by clearing its reading calendar that you want to wrap things up and get home?
Yeah, I think, uh, the House made the request for the recess because of the COVID outbreak on the House side, and we agreed with that, concurred, and went home. We had hoped to be done by the 26th of March. We now hope to be done by April 16th. Um, we think we're getting closer to some agreement with the House on that. Uh, our effort to clear our calendar is to send that message that our members are ready to be done and to go home and get back to their families and their way of life, their farming, their ranching. These are critical times of the year for them. So we're trying to get done as quickly as we can, and there's still a lot of work to be done yet for appropriations and things like that that are taking a little longer than normal, but we hope to be done have all of our work done by next Friday. And we may have to wait a 5-day period for veto issues, but hopefully by next Friday, we have all of our business finished between the two bodies.
What are you hearing from your appropriations chairman? Is that, considering how many budgets are still left out there, is that realistic?
Yeah, it is. They have a plan. They can actually be finished by the 14th with their part of it. That means, we have their budgets. Every time the House kills a budget, probably adds a day or two. Um, the things they're concerned about are more policy issue than they are budget issues, but you know they haven't taken the time yet to put it into policy what their concerns are.
This wouldn't be the first time that the Senate and the House haven't quite seen eye to eye on how to approach some of these issues. I've been
No, and
around
it
for a
won't be the last in the future either. There's a natural just kind of tension between the bodies. If the original drafters of our Constitution wanted to be easier, they would have just had one branch of government, but that doesn't work very well in a democracy. So you have to have these two branches, and then the of the legislature and the governor, and so it's natural to have some tension. But we're actually working closer together than it might appear.
And that's not the only tension when we're talking about balance of powers and seeing things differently that we've talked about this session. There was a lot of talk early on, especially in January and February, about the balance of powers between the legislative and executive branches. We haven't seen much pass both the House and the Senate. Are we going to see bills addressing either the governor's powers or the Department of Health and Welfare's powers come out of both chambers before your goal end date of April 16th?
Yeah, I think you will. There's one bill that's already been signed into law that requires a health district order to be approved by each county commission in that district. We think that's important. There's a Senate Bill 1136, which deals with extreme emergencies. That's actually passed both bodies, but it was amended in the House. We have to concur in those, which we did yesterday. We will take that up and vote on it later today. So I think we'll have that one done. We're going to amend House Bill 135, and we've done that. We'll take that up, I believe, this morning. So we hope to have those done. Those 135 actually deals with ordinary or natural disasters. So I think we'll have that done. There's one of the reasons that we didn't just end everything with a concurrent resolution, which we talked about doing, and there were several of them went back and forth in the first week or two, was we found out that under the current code, we wouldn't qualify for the federal funds to come in unless we had an actual emergency declaration in place. The new codes that we're putting out there would add a word as rising out of that would allow for the state to continue to receive funds without actually having to, on a 30-day process, renew those declarations. And that's what's been going on for years. There's some emergencies related to flood and other problems in the state that we receive money for over a longer period of time, but the emergency is actually over. And the new law would allow the governor to receive the funds without having to continue the declarations of emergency. So we think we made some good progress.
Is there concern that that would run afoul of federal law, that the federal government might see it a little bit differently, that if you don't have that in place, you can't continue to receive those federal funds?
Yeah, and the legislation that we proposed is that the governor would have the right to continue the emergencies that's required to receive the funds. But we believe we've worked with Homeland Security and we've worked with the governor's office, and we think we've come to some language that by using a rising out of that emergency, that would then qualify us to have the federal funds coming in. The real issue that we deal with is, do we have the matching funds in some cases? And that does take an act of the legislature. So I think we've kind of balanced it out. We put a light touch on it, but we think we've resolved a lot of the significant issues that we experienced during this extremely unusual year of 2020.
You know, as you're talking about your concerns with executive branch overreach, I wanted to ask you about a press release that actually just came into my inbox as we were having this discussion about Republican leadership, in their words, discovering immunization registry violations, that the state's immunization registry doesn't necessarily allow for the collection of data on adult vaccinations.
That's
Can you talk to me about your concerns about this registry that's been around for years?
Well, the registry's for children, and that's keeping track of child vaccinations. But they applied that to saying, well, you aged out of being a child, but you're still getting vaccine, so you can be added to the registry. And we're basically objecting to that. We don't think that's what the current code says, and that's the reason we wrote a letter to directly to Health and Welfare and gave them notice of our concerns. And we also wanted the public to be aware, so that they're aware that their information may be being collected.
Now, is your proposed fix changing the code to allow for this information to be collected, or do you want the department to stop entirely?
We want the department to stop.
Does that potentially raise
There is
concern?
no code authorizing them to collect it for adults.
Does that raise concerns that medical providers won't have accurate information if people switch between healthcare systems, for example, or get one dose in one city and another dose in another city?
No, it really doesn't, because, if you're going to your doctor, to your healthcare provider, there's going to be part of your medical record. Also, the way the vaccinations for, at least for COVID, is you're getting a vaccination card. I have a little yellow card that I get at the district health office when I've traveled and had to get, shots to do international travel. So there is a record, you can have that information, but with such a widespread vaccinating process as COVID is necessitating, we don't think it's right under the current laws for them to actually collect that data.
Something that we will continue to follow,
Right.
Certainly.
Right. And they haven't
on
responded yet, so we don't know what their response will be. We've only had some verbal communication with them.
Back to the legislature on Thursday, the Senate Local Government and Taxation Committee sent the House income tax proposal to the amending order. What sort of amendments might we see, and is there any risk of the House not concurring to those?
Well, there's always a risk of the House not concurring. They don't like us messing around with their tax bills. The Constitution allows them to originate revenue bills, but we also know that the Senate has the right to amend those. Now, politically, that does go back to the tension I talked about earlier in this, and so that they don't like us doing that, but we certainly have the right to do that. I think when we actually amend 332, that we'll probably have an agreement in place as to how to amend it between the two bodies. And as long as we do that, I think they'll probably be okay with the amendments. We've done that on 1136, which is the powers of the governor. 135, again, powers of the governor. So we've worked together very well trying to come up with what we think are necessary and reasonable amendments on very key legislation this time. And I think that's, in fact, we met this morning, had ongoing discussions about exactly that as to how we advance House Bill 332 and the potential tax breaks and returns that would give to people.
What kind of amendments might we expect from that?
Well, I think there's some questions about, the brackets themselves, the percentage of reduction in the individual tax rate and corporate tax rate. There's also some discussion, depending upon how much ongoing money we have, potentially doing some other, property tax relief things. So we're at that final stage of trying to blend everything together and come up with a good package, which I think we will, and we'll have that debate and discussion next week.
How about transportation funding? As we're speaking on Friday morning, the Senate Transportation Committee, of course, hasn't yet taken up the House proposal on transportation funding. What are you hearing from your caucus on their feelings on the House's proposal?
We haven't actually talked about it in caucus per se. The Chairman Den Hartog on our side has given some kind of updates as negotiations have progressed over the last couple of weeks to caucus, but we just received their final bill yesterday. It appears to be something that I personally can support, but that's going to be up to each individual within our caucus. And we also have the minority weighing in on these issues, but we think there's a real need for infrastructure improvements. Some will be one time, some will be ongoing, and there'll be some, at least in the form it is now, significant bonding that could occur for the state, for state projects, which benefit both the state system and the local system, because our state highways do go through communities and serve local communities. So we think there's benefit there, and funds would potentially be dispersed to both local and to Idaho Transportation Department.
All right, April 16th, I am going to mark my calendar. Senate President Pro Tem Chuck Winder, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, Melissa.